My mother-in-law hates me. And it's not just a little dislike, it's a full-blown, all-consuming hatred, the kind that's so thick you can cut it with a knife. And do you want to know why? Because I work. I have a job, a full-time career that I'm proud of, and I am not afraid to chase my ambitions. But in her eyes, that makes me the worst kind of woman, selfish, disrespectful, and downright unfit to be her son's wife. Her son, my husband, oh well, he's the exact opposite of me. For nearly 2 years, he's done almost nothing but laze around, playing video games from dawn till dusk, sleeping in until noon or later, and scrolling endlessly on his phone. When I bring up the subject of looking for work, he always has some excuse or another. I'm trying, he says. But it's clear that his idea of trying is very different from mine. And yet, somehow, I'm the one who's the problem. The moment I married her son, my mother-in-law made it crystal clear what she thought of me. A real wife, she told me during our first visit, stays home, cooks 3 hot meals a day, irons her husband's shirts, and makes sure he's happy and relaxed. When I laughed and pointed out that her son hadn't held a steady job in years, she dismissed me with a sharp look. That's because you don't support him properly, she snapped. From then on, every time she came over, and it was often unannounced and always with a judgmental glare, she found something wrong. I didn't cook enough, I didn't dress the way a proper wife should, I wasn't home enough, and worst of all, I had the audacity to work. She lectured me about how women belong in the kitchen, about how I was abandoning my husband by spending so much time away from home. It was like living under a microscope where every move I made was wrong. And all the while, her son just sat in the background, oblivious, letting his mother's poison drip over me. One time, she even dropped off a stack of old, dusty marriage advice books, relics from the 1950s, I swear, filled with gems like a wife should never burden her husband with her problems and to keep yourself attractive, and have dinner ready when he gets home. The kicker? Her son didn't even leave the house most days. It's not just the judgment that's suffocating, it's the hypocrisy. I'm the one working, paying the bills, trying to keep things together. He's the one who's doing nothing, and she acts like I'm the villain for not quitting my job to become a housewife. I can feel myself shrinking under their combined pressure, but I refuse to disappear. I refuse to be the stereotype she expects me to be, a doormat, a servant, a woman with no life of her own. But every day is a battle. A battle between wanting to stand my ground and feeling completely alone in this fight. The tension didn't just stay beneath the surface, it exploded into my daily life like a volcano ready to erupt. Every time my mother-in-law came around, it was like stepping into a battlefield. She would make passive-aggressive comments disguised as a concern. "Don't you think you spend too much time at work?" she asked one afternoon, fixing me with a look that was more accusation than question. "Your husband needs you at home. Men need their wives to take care of them, especially when they're going through tough times." I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout that my husband wasn't going through some temporary phase. He had been unemployed and unmotivated for years, relying entirely on me to keep the household afloat. But I held my tongue. She always had this look, a mix of superiority and condescension, like I was some foolish girl who didn't know her place. And every time she spoke, it chipped away at my confidence a little more. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day at work, I came home to find her sitting in our living room, waiting. She greeted me with a tight smile and immediately launched into a monologue about how marriages should work. "A good wife," she said, "knows her role. You can't expect your husband to be a man if you don't support him by being at home, making sure he's comfortable." I looked at her, disbelief simmering just beneath my calm exterior. "And what exactly is he doing to support me?" I asked. She blinked, clearly caught off guard by the question. "He's doing his best. You just need to be patient." Patience. The word echoed in my mind as I thought about the months and years I'd spent waiting for my husband to get up, to take responsibility, to be the partner I needed. But nothing changed. My husband barely lifted a finger around the house. I cooked, cleaned, paid bills, worked full-time, and still felt like I was failing somehow because I wasn't the submissive wife his mother expected. The worst part was the silence from my husband. Whenever I brought up his behavior, he would avoid the conversation or promise he was trying harder. But trying, to him, meant clicking refresh on job websites while sitting on the couch. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, and I was trapped on the tracks. Living with this constant pressure wore me down faster than I ever imagined possible. Every interaction with my mother-in-law felt like a test I was doomed to fail. She didn't hide her contempt for me, it was in every glance, every word dripping with judgment. One afternoon, she walked in unexpectedly while I was preparing dinner. I was exhausted from work, trying to keep some semblance of normalcy, and there she was, arms crossed, ready to criticize. "You call this cooking?" she scoffed, glancing at the half-made meal. "When I was your age, I had 3 kids and still managed to make a feast every night." I forced a smile, trying not to let her words sting. "I'm doing my best," I said quietly. "Your best isn't good enough," she replied, shaking her head. "If you truly love my son, you'd put your career aside and focus on your family." I felt a fire ignite inside me. "My career is what's keeping this family alive," I shot back. "If I quit my job, we'd be on the street, and maybe then you'd finally see how hard I'm working." Her face twisted with disgust, but she didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out a battered old book, one of those outdated marriage manuals she loved so much. "You need to learn your role," she said. It was a nightmare that felt endless. My husband, meanwhile, just sat silently, never standing up for me. When I confronted him about his mother's behavior, he shrugged and said, "She means well." Well, her well-meaning was breaking me. But I couldn't give up. I had to find a way through this toxic storm for myself and for what little peace I could salvage. Days blurred into weeks, and the pressure from my mother-in-law didn't let up for a second. Every visit felt like a subtle assault on my dignity. She never missed a chance to remind me that I wasn't doing enough, that my job, my ambitions, my very presence outside the house was a betrayal. I remember one afternoon when she cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes cold and unforgiving. "You know," she said, "a woman's place is with her family. What will people think if your husband has to rely on you to pay the bills?" Her words stung worse than any insult. I wanted to tell her that it wasn't about pride, it was about survival. That while she sat comfortably judging, I was the one waking up every day, working my fingers to the bone just so we didn't drown in bills and stress. My husband heard the exchange but stayed silent. He never defended me, never stood up to his mother. At times, it felt like I was fighting alone against 2 enemies, the lazy man I married and the cruel woman who raised him. I started questioning everything. Was I wrong? Was I really the problem here? Maybe, I thought bitterly, some women were meant to be at home, tending to their husbands, while others had to carry the weight of the world alone. But deep down, I knew the truth. The truth was that I deserved better. I deserved respect, partnership, and support, and not judgment, neglect, and constant criticism. Yet every day I faced the same nightmare. My mother-in-law's cold eyes, my husband's silence, and the overwhelming feeling that no matter what I did, I wasn't enough. And so I kept going because giving up wasn't an option. Not when my dignity, my sanity, and my future were on the line. The nights were the hardest. After long, exhausting days at work, I would come home hoping for a moment of peace, but instead, I found myself walking on eggshells. The house felt colder, heavier, filled with tension I couldn't escape. One evening, I found my husband sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, eyes glazed over from hours of gaming. The room smelled stale, cluttered with takeout boxes and dirty laundry. I swallowed the lump in my throat and started cleaning quietly. Suddenly, my mother-in-law appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by the silence. "Look at this place," she said loudly, shaking her head. "No wonder your husband can't focus on finding a job. You're enabling him." I bit back tears of frustration. "I'm doing everything I can," I said softly. "But maybe if he had to take responsibility, he'd actually try." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You should be supporting your husband, not nagging him. Maybe if you weren't so busy with your job, you'd have time to make him a real wife." The words hit me like a slap. I wanted to scream that I was the only reason we went homeless, that I carried this family on my back, but the words caught in my throat. My husband just looked away, pretending not to hear, as if this wasn't his problem. I realized then how deeply alone I was in this marriage. The woman who was supposed to support me, my mother-in-law, was the one tearing me down. And the man I married refused to stand by my side. I lay awake that night, wondering how I had gotten here, trapped in a toxic cycle where love was conditional, respect was absent, and survival felt like a battle I might never win. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The weight of the constant criticism and the emotional neglect was crushing me. I needed to find a way out, or at least a way to fight back. One evening, after another exhausting day, I sat my husband down. "We can't keep living like this," I said firmly. "Your mother's treatment of me is unbearable, and you need to do something. Find a job, stand up for me, or this won't work. He looked at me with tired eyes and said, I'm trying. You don't understand how hard it is. But his trying felt empty. He wasn't taking real steps. And every time I pushed, he shut down or changed the subject. I started setting boundaries with my mother-in-law too. The next time she showed up and announced, I told her, you can visit, but only if you respect me and my decisions. She gave me a look like I'd insulted her personally. I'm just trying to help, she said coldly. No, I said. You're trying to control my life, and that ends now. For a moment, the house was silent. It was the first time I'd ever said those words out loud, and it felt like a small victory. But the battle was far from over. My husband still wouldn't stand up to his mother, and the toxic environment remained. Still, I was done hiding. Done being the silent victim. I was ready to fight it for my dignity, for my future, and for the life I deserved. One afternoon, I came home earlier than usual, hoping to catch my husband in a better mood. Instead, I found him and his mother deep in conversation, or more like her lecturing him while he nodded obediently. When she saw me, her smile didn't reach her eyes. Look who's home early, she said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe now you can stop being so selfish and spend more time where you belong. I felt a surge of anger rise inside me. I work hard to keep this family afloat, I said, stepping forward. Unlike some people here who think video games are a full-time job. Her eyes narrowed. You don't understand family. Your job isn't what holds this marriage together. I clenched my fists. No, it's not, but without my job, we'd have nothing, and you know it. My husband looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. I realized then that his loyalty was split and I was losing ground. That night, I lay awake replaying the confrontation in my mind. The bitterness, the exhaustion, the loneliness, it all hit me like a tidal wave. I knew I couldn't keep living in this toxic environment. Something had to change. Days later, the tension in the house reached a breaking point, like a fragile glass about to shatter under pressure. I couldn't take the silent suffering anymore. One evening, I confronted them both, my husband and his mother, in front of each other. I'm done, I said, voice trembling but firm. Done pretending I'm okay with being insulted, belittled, and treated like I'm invisible. My mother-in-law laughed, cold and sharp. You think you're the victim here? You're ruining my son's life. I looked at my husband. Is this true? Are you really okay with living like this, with letting her tear me down? He looked away, unable to answer. The room fell silent, a thick, heavy silence. And then, like glass shattering on the floor, everything broke. I threw down my wedding ring and walked out the door, not as the defeated woman they wanted me to be, but as someone reclaiming her power. The sound of that ring hitting the floor echoed in my ears, a final, undeniable crack in the toxic illusion it tried to trap me in. I don't know what comes next. But I know one thing for sure, I will never let anyone make me small again.